language is English, and you can turn on the interpretation to Bahasa Indonesia by clicking on the globe logo, which is on the right-hand side of your Zoom panel. And then you can also ask questions after the speakers or the panelists has ended their presentation. And for asking questions, you can use the raise hand feature for those of you who are tuning in through Zoom, and the moderator will invite you to elaborate your questions. Or for those of you joining through YouTube, you can type your question directly on the live comment section, and we will address you shortly. And now, without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Fabi Tumiwa, the Executive Director of Institute of Essential Services Reform, to deliver his opening remarks. To Mr. Fabi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Siha, and welcome everybody to this event, Making Energy Green and Low Carbon to Support Sustainable Growth, Advancing the Role of Civil Society in Southeast Asia Energy Transitions during the Indonesia ASEAN Chairmanship 2023. I welcome you to this event, and especially distinguished speakers, Bapak Ridwan Budi Santoso representing Mr. Wanhar. Pak Ridwan is the coordinator for Working Group Investment and Cooperation, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, that also responsible for ASEAN cooperations in the ministry. And also Pak Wisnu Murthy from Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Also my friends, distinguished panelists, Ibu Esther Tamara from FPCI, Nataron Ngoson from Cambodia, Director of Energy Lab Cambodia, my long friend Anthony Tan, Executive Officers of All Party Parliamentary Group on Malaysian Sustainable Development Goals, Gary Arances from Center for Energy, Ecology and Development from the Philippines, and Charya Senpong from Greenpeace, Thailand. Ladies and gentlemen, this event is part of the Climate Diplomacy Program. It's one of ISR program that aims to increase climate ambition and deliver energy transition in Southeast Asia. And we would like to accelerate the energy transition in this region. And one of the activities is stakeholder engagement and building collaboration in the region, including diplomatic representative and international institutions. After the success of G20 presidency in 2022, Indonesia held ASEAN Chairmanship this year. And with the theme of this year presidency's epicentrum of growth, Indonesia seeks to strengthen ASEAN position as a stable and peaceful region. And through this theme, I believe that Indonesia is striving to prepare ASEAN to advance further by providing strategic solution to various strategic issues in the region. Indonesia is also upholding so that ASEAN can become a strong, inclusive region with sustainable economic growth. Therefore, strong collaboration is expected to be formed among ASEAN members to support the achievement of this goal. Well, this optimistic view can be understood through the economic and historical development as well as the achievements so far. According to Asia Development Bank, the this institution has forecasted that the economic growth in Southeast Asia to be around 4.7% this year amid the global demand weakens and also the turmoil of the global economy. But also, if you look at the terms of trade and investment, ASEAN has posed quite promising in terms of trade and investment over the same period. In 2022, ASEAN total trade accounted around 7.7% of the global world trade, or around 17.6% of East Asia total trade. Then ASEAN itself considered the largest market for export of goods from the trade bloc and accounting for more than almost 22% of total ASEAN export in 2021, followed by mainland China and the US and the EU, Hong Kong and Japan. This current condition is an advantage to achieve Indonesia ASEAN Chairmanship vision, with the note that it should be based on and aligned with Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. In historical development, since its establishment in 1967, ASEAN as a regional organization has developed its institutional capacity to be more integrated, also face and able to manage a lot of global and regional challenges, namely political, economic, and security issues. But today, this region faces a new challenges, which is climate change. It's also a global challenge. And considering the issue cover a lot of aspects, including a cross-cutting issue with the energy sectors, which currently energy transition from fossil to renewables, to clean energy. Therefore, it needs collaboration from all stakeholders, private and public, to tackle the climate change challenge and deliver energy transition in due time. From cooperation perspective, ASEAN countries have tried to tackle this issue in the ASEAN through the ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change and has formed ASEAN Energy Cooperation in this particular issue that we highlight. But we also need further collaboration at the grassroots level and the increasingly significant role of ASEAN civil society in the region, and how ASEAN civil society, either as individual or as a group, can contribute to make the energy system in Southeast Asia transform into sustainable energy system and support the sustainable growth of the region through the advancing their role as civil societies. And this is the opportunity for Indonesia during the chairmanship. We know that in Indonesia context, there's a vibrant environment that civil society can actively participate in the policy space, as experienced by ISR and a number of CSO, and we can contribute in supporting our society as well to help to meet our government target in both climate and sustainable development. So we expect that this event can become a good start to knowing and understanding that the state of art of climate and energy agenda in the region, and Indonesia chairmanship priorities on those respective issues. And also we can gather and explore ideas from civil society that can be advanced further in this year chairmanship. We have a great expectation that after this event, ASEAN CSO that focus on the energy transition, particularly can initiate concrete collaboration in the near future, and together can contribute to accelerate the energy transition in the region and tackling climate change challenges. Last but not least, I would like to say thanks to all of you for your attendance and all the speakers also. I hope that our discussion will be beneficial for the development of energy transition in the region. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the event today. Back to you, Siha.
All of the event to our moderator today, Muhammad Rum, SIP IMAS, the lecturer from Department of International Relations, Universitas Gadjah Mada. To Mas Rum, you may have the floor.
Thank you very much, Siha, for your kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. The distinguished guests, also the speakers. Thank you very much for your time in joining us today in our discussion. Let me briefly inform about our format of the discussions. Basically, we will have two different sessions. Session one, we will have 30 minutes of learning from Pak Ridwan Budi Santoso and also Pak Wisnu Murti, both from the representative of the Indonesian government. I would like to briefly introduce Pak Ridwan Budi Santoso. He is now the Investment and Electricity Cooperation Working Group Coordinator at the Directorate General of Electricity, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Republic of Indonesia. Thank you very much, Pak Ridwan, for being here. Also, we have Pak Wisnu Murti as the ASEAN Coordinator at the Directorate General of Climate Change Control, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Republic of Indonesia. Thank you, Pak Wisnu, for being here. I would like also to appreciate for Institute for Essential Service Reform, Pak Fabi Tumiwa, Pak Arif Rosadi, for coordinating this event. I think this event is very important, as Pak Fabi Tumiwa has mentioned. There is a need and urgency for people participation in ASEAN's regional framework, and most importantly here in tackling climate change. Because as we know, this year in Indonesian Chairmanship of ASEAN, we have targeted to kick off some initiatives and deliverables, including in tackling the issues of environment protection and also climate justice. Among the deliverables are to set up blue economic regional frameworks, renewable energy resiliency, electric vehicle ecosystem development, and harmonization on the implementation of SDGs. However, as I came from academic communities, we've learned that there are so many things to catch up in ASEAN in its mandate to be more people-oriented ASEAN. A lot of critics said that ASEAN is too elitist in some situations. That's why event like this can help to further strengthen the connections and also the exchange of ideas, exchange of recommendations between government and civil society in order to create a better and strengthen the people-oriented ASEAN itself. So without further ado, in order to understand some of the deliverables that has been mentioned in detail, we would like to invite in the first section, Bapak Ridwan Budi Santoso from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources to enlighten us about the programs, initiatives, and deliverables that we have in this year. Thank you. The time is yours, Pak Ridwan.
Thank you, Pak Rum. Does my sounds clean and clear?
Yeah, sounds really good, Pak.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Rum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Distinguished Pak Fabi and Pak Rum as moderators and all speakers. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present here on behalf of Pak Wanhar, Director of Electricity Program Development. The director asked me to brief you on ASEAN on the way and relevant to the Indonesia Chairmanship of G20 last year, the presidency in 2022, towards the Indonesia Chairmanship of ASEAN in 2023, and the relevance of energy transition agenda for ASEAN. Okay. Can Mbak Fia, could you share the script, please? All right. Okay. Next. A full screen. Okay. Okay, next. Okay, now we are rolling back. We would like to speak about the last year. We are rolling back to 2022. Indonesia presidency built up by three pillars. They are global health, digital economic transformations, and of course, the energy transitions. In energy transition itself, Indonesia was trying to pursue global deal to accelerate the energy transitions. Okay, next. Then as the Indonesia's G20 presidency flagship theme is recover together, recover stronger, and then we translate it into the Energy Transition Forum, we'd like to build the bold commitment to achieve global target on energy access, also escalate the viable clean technologies and intensify energy transition via financing. Indonesia is trying to build the energy transitions ministerial communique and also the Bali Compact. And under many intensive discussions, either formally and informally, intersessional and plenary and so on, then these three main points of the presidencies emphasized. First one is the securing energy accessibility. Second one is the smart and clean energy technology scaling up. And the third one is advancing energy financing. Okay, next. And this is the result, the Bali Compact. The Compact, it's not literally meaning that things are neatly packed all together, but beyond that, the Compact stands for the common principle in accelerating clean energy transitions. We call it Compact. The G20 energy transitions energy ministers in principle agreed to many things in several we can highlight here, like enhancing energy security, market stability and affordability, securing energy supply, infrastructures and systems, diversifying energy system and mixes and lowering emissions and so on, so on. It is very easy to find the document online. You can find it out anywhere. Okay, next. As we are about to talk about ASEAN Energy Chairmanships, also allow me to then dive into the ASEAN framework to give you the context. Okay, next. An ASEAN as a building block of regional cooperations established since 1967, I guess. Over the years, the ASEAN has become reputable and well-organized cooperations. There are three communities pillar in ASEAN. They are political, security, economical, and socio-cultural. And the energy cooperation itself under the economic community. Okay, next. Now, as you may recall, the Indonesia G20 presidency last year built up by three pillars, as I showed you previously, and it's solely chairmanship priority for the G20. In Indonesia chairmanship to ASEAN, we have the theme ASEAN Matters, epicenter of growth. There are also three pillars. There are recovery and rebuilding. It means that rebuilding regional growth through connected markets and new competitiveness. And then digital economy, accelerating inclusive digital economy transformations and participations. And also the sustainability. Now, the sustainability is promoting a sustainable economic growth for a resilient future. And the energy itself rose improving energy sustainable security. Okay, next. In ASEAN Energy Cooperations, we have the ASEAN Plan of Actions on Energy Cooperations, as we call it APEC. It's been there since the energy cooperations established right after the the ASEAN itself established. Now, the theme of ASEAN, the APEC's themes are enhancing energy connectivity and market integrations in ASEAN to achieve energy security, accessibility, affordability, and sustainability for all. These themes are for the APEC, since 2016 up to 2025, but now it is under the phase 2, 2021 to 2025. And the sub-themes are the enhancing energy transitions and strengthening energy resilience through greater innovations and cooperations. Okay, next. Let me show you a glimpse of ASEAN achievement as per 2022. As you can see, this is a status for 2022, and by next month, we will have the SOME meeting, the General Officials Meeting on Energy. So this will be updated as is. But as I may inform you right now, there are 7 program area in ASEAN Energy Cooperations. They are ASEAN Power Grid, then Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline, Coal and Clean Coal Technology, Energy Efficiency and Conservation, and Renewable Energy, and Regional Energy Policy and Planning, and last one is Civilian Nuclear Energy. You can see the scorecard progress as per 2022. You can see that the least progress or reached by ASEAN Power Grid. Now, this one is one thing that we would like to pursue in this chairmanship to get better achievement by 2025. Let me also inform you, in ASEAN Power Grid, we have successfully commenced the first multilateral power trade. We call it Laos, Thai, Malaysia, and Singapore Power Interconnection Port Integrations Project, LTMSPIP. And by after this, I will inform you in details our chairmanship priority relevant to this one. And the progress for ASEAN gas pipeline are we have development of 4 projects and so on. And you can see also the clean coal and clean coal technology. There are several activities. It's some completed, some ongoing, and some started, and some others not yet started, and so on. But allow me also to inform you there are 2 milestones in ASEAN energy achievements. They are the energy efficiency and conservation. The ASEAN energy intensity reductions target already reached 23.8% by 2020, and we expect by next month we will have the update numbers for at least 2021. And then also the second milestones are the renewable energy. In renewable energy, there are 2 targets. There are RE and total primary energy supply. We have reached 14.2% in 2022 out of 25% as ASEAN expected to have. And also renewable energy mix in total installed power capacity up to 2020 are 33.5% out of 35% target by 2025, of course. Okay, now next. Okay, now we'll move to Indonesia chairmanship in energy sector. Okay, now this one. We already set the 3 major deliverables for ASEAN energy chairmanship in Indonesia chairmanship. The first one is the joint declarations of the 41st ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting on sustainable energy security through interconnectivity. These documents, these key policy documents for advancing cross-border energy infrastructure project among ASEAN, including the explorations of new multilateral power trade, as I mentioned before, that the LTMS, the first one, and we expect to have this multilateral power trade in BIMP area, sub-region area will be the second multilateral power trade. As you can may understand that the multilateral power trade were built by connecting bilateral countries interconnected. And also the declaration will become the we expect to have it as a key policy document to strengthen intra-ASEAN energy community and technology development. We also would like to build sustainable regional supply chains for new and renewable energy, and also accelerate the transfer of technology, knowledge, and of course, expertise among ASEAN. These declarations will be the spirit of ASEAN unity, and we expect it to be a collaborations in energy sector with a joint to achieve energy interconnectivity. The second one is the joint statement of the 4 countries, PIMP, which is Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines for the power integrations project. We expect by this joint statement, the 4 ministers may initiate the cross-border interconnectivity of power grid between ASEAN member states in the sub-region. And we will seek to create interconnections for that. And the last one is the, we expect, this is because this is one is under the state-owned electricity utility or authority. This is their domain to execute the two of what I have informed you before. So we expect the 4 utilities are signing the MOU for the interconnectivity. Okay, next. Now, how to realize those deliverables? Now, we will have several activities under the deliverables. The first one is we propose to adopt and also endorse the joint declarations, and then we also propose to organize high-level policy dialogue on sustainable energy financing and mobilizations of energy investment. And also we propose to publish the long-term ASEAN renewable energy roadmap. And we also propose to disseminate the ASEAN best practices on energy security and energy transition through conduct of various thematic events. These 4 are Indonesia initiative, and the remaining 2 is the carryover from Cambodia chairmanship. They expect us to finalize what they have pioneering. They are to advance CCUS implementations in the energy sector by having the FGD and activity under the cooperations on, and as far as also to initiate the possible pilot project. And the second one also the carryover to organize a consultative meeting or a workshop to prepare development of intergovernmental agreement to advance the multilateral power trade in ASEAN power grid region. So maybe you would like to inform me also for the number 4, disseminate ASEAN best practice on energy security. We were supported by several or many international organizations to have event series throughout our chairmanship terms up to December since February 2023. So okay, that's all I'd like to inform you. Okay, next slide. Okay, I think it's enough. Thank you, and back to you, Pak.
Thank you very much, Pak Ridwan, for the explanation. And I think this is very timely for us to reinvigorate again the idea of clean energy transition, as this is the goal of the ASEAN in this year. Some of the deliverables is to promote cross-border interconnectivity and infrastructure program for the ASEAN power grid, and also introducing the newly concept of the energy financing for the energy transition. Thank you, Pak Ridwan. Later on, we will hear from the representatives of civil society organization across the region. We have Ibu Esther Tamara from Foreign Policy Community Indonesia, Also, Bapak Natarun Ngoson from Energy Lab, Cambodia, Bapak Anthony Tan from All Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia on Sustainable Goals, and also Ibu Arien de Ocampo from Center for Energy, Ecology, and Development, the Philippines, and Charia Senpong from Greenpeace, Thailand. But before listening to the civil society organizations representatives, we are now moving to Pak Wisnu Murthy, ASEAN Coordinator from the Directorate General of Climate Change Control at the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Republic of Indonesia, to present some of the deliverables that the ministry is now working on the Indonesian Chairmanship of 2023. The time and floor is yours, Pak Wisnu Murthy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Pak Rum. So, good afternoon, colleagues, Pak Fabi and other colleagues here. So, my name is Murthy. So, I work under DG of Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Forestation. I would like to represent my director, Dr. Wahyu Marjaka, as Indonesia National Focal Point for the Climate Issues Forum in ASEAN, who cannot be joined here today. So today I would like to share with you the climate priority agenda during Indonesia's ASEAN Chairmanship. So could you help me to share my presentation? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. In the next slide, as we know, and also Pak Ridwan said that maybe we can move to the next slide, please. The cooperation in the ASEAN Forum is divided in 3 pillars, namely economic pillar, and then socio-cultural pillar, and political and security pillar. This issue of climate change itself is discussed in the 2 pillars, economic and social cultural. So under economic pillars, there is ASEAN Working Group on Forest and Climate Change, which was initially established from ASEAN Regional Knowledge Network on Forest and Climate Change, or ARKNFCC. ARKNFCC itself was established based on the decision of the 11 ASEAN Senate Official on Forestry meeting, which was held in Kuala Lumpur on 2008. So the purpose of the establishment of this network is to strengthen the knowledge base related to forest and climate change within ASEAN. As of meeting 19 in Laos, it was decided that the subsidiary bodies under ASOF would be restructured into ASEAN Working Group. Therefore, the ARKNFCC must also be continued in the form of new body, which meeting also decided that Indonesia would continue its duties in leading the Working Group of Forest and Climate Change. Furthermore, under social cultural pillar, there is the ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change. So the name is almost same, it's the difference only the forest, so AWGFCC and AWGCC, something like that. So in general, the differences between the 2 working group is the focus of the discussion. The AWGFCC focuses more on optimizing the role of forest in the climate change, while AWGCC discuss more general issues related to regional climate change. In Indonesia, the national focal point of 2 working groups are under the Directorate General of Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So in the next slide, we can see that the AWGFCC, Forest and Climate Change, has functioned to respond to emerging issues of forest climate change as identified in the agenda of work program of ASOF and AMAF. ASOF is senior official forum and AMAF is ministerial forum. And then the second is support ASOF and AMAF in decision making by providing inputs based on research result, policy analysis, and lesson learned on the forest and climate change. And number 3 is enhance mutual understanding and support effective implementation of the strategic plan of action for ASEAN cooperation in forestry, promote ASEAN common understanding and exchange of information and knowledge, coordinated regional response to issue of climate change, and increase capacity building, including research and development. Indonesia is the lead country of this working group, and the last meeting was held on May this year with Lau PDR as the host. I would like also to share that some of the documents of projects that we were produced within this year included the study of nature-based solution in ASEAN across forest, barren, and coastal ecosystem, ASEAN project improving regional capacities on nature-based solution, ecosystem-based approach to support social forestry development in ASEAN, and study on decarbonization in ASEAN agriculture and forest sector. So this slide shows the plan of action of the working group of forest and climate change. We see that in the green boxes shows some program on strategic plan of action ASEAN Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, namely enhancing the forestry sector resilience and role in climate change, and strengthening ASEAN's joint approaches on regional and international issues affecting the forest sector. So it is divided in several actions program. We can see here in the blue boxes, namely integration of climate change in the forest sector, promotion of forestry and climate change adaptation, enhancement of forest in climate change mitigation, strengthen ASEAN coordination action at regional and international fora, and enhancement of ASEAN joint approaches in addressing regional and international forestry issues. And the orange boxes here is the activities under Plan of Action 2001 and 2025. We identified here priority activities such as encouraging private sector engagement in forests and climate change issue, and provide capacity building on forest carbon accounting. We also discussed the necessity to conduct activities in promoting dialogue on land sector and adaptation measures on climate change, and exchange and sharing information on nature-based solution. Other potential activities mentioned include capacity building on the requirements of enhanced transparency reporting under the Paris Agreement of all issues, climate change negotiation, and cross-sectoral dialogue on land sector. Okay, so next is the plan of, so the previous is plan of action of working of forest and climate change, and now is the plan of action working group on climate change. So the plan of action working group on climate change consists of 8 core themes here in the orange box, namely climate change mitigation, long-term planning and assessment of NDCs, climate change mitigation, climate modeling and assessment, MRV and stock taking of greenhouse gas emission, climate finance and market, and cross-sector coordination and technology transfer. So those 8 core themes is divided in several activities as shown in the blue boxes. So Indonesia itself lead several activities, particularly in the issues of adaptive skill of the vulnerable groups, community based on climate action, ASEAN NDC partnership, strengthen science and policy interface in the climate change related decision-making process, and promote and enhance the science of interlinkage between climate change and land and ocean. So under in the next slide is under the working group of climate change. We already several studies or activities. The next slide, please. So we already developed ASEAN State Climate Change Report document, which already been endorsed in 2001. and then ASEAN Climate Change Strategic Action Plan 2030, which is still in the drafting stage. ASEAN Center for Climate Change, this is initiated by Brunei Darussalam in 2021, and it is currently still on state of discussing the establishment agreement document. And we also have ASEAN UCAN, ASEAN Youth on Climate Action Initiative, there is platform for the young youth generation in ASEAN to discuss climate change matters. There are also clean air and climate solution for ASEAN report, which is still in the discussion stage. Also, we have training workshop on ASEAN climate finance strategy last March, and then we now are developing also ASEAN guideline on greenhouse gas measurement reporting, and also enhancing cooperation in carbon pricing among ASEAN member states, which with the World Bank, which also in the still in the drafting stage. So for period 22 and to 2025, Malaysia is become the chair of AWGCC, and the next annual meeting will be held in Cambodia on 24 to 26 May 2023, next week. So that is regarding the chairmanship of Indonesia in ASEAN 2023, especially for the climate change issue. We have at least 2 deliverables here, namely the ASEAN Joint Statement on Climate Change to the COP of 28 to UNFCCC, and study of ASEAN Community-Based Climate Action. The first deliverable, ASEAN Joint Statement, is kind of statement made by ASEAN through AWGCC regarding global condition of climate change. The statement is made every year, and this year Indonesia become the lead country. Generally, the document contains information on current condition of global change, encouragement to the parties, and also encouragement the developed country. Currently, we already have a pre-draft 0, and we have planned to circulate this document to the IMS this week for further attention and discussion. And the next deliverables is ASEAN Community-Based Climate Action. It is drafted with consideration that the tropics are considered more vulnerable to devastating impact of climate change than other parts of the world. The ASEAN countries themselves are considered among the world's more vulnerable countries to the impact of climate change. Therefore, ASEAN's broader climate goals consist of more specific goals for development, adaptation, mitigation, and synergize between adaptation and mitigation. So in connection with the above, we view that non-party stakeholders, which includes business, civil society organization, and local communities, are playing an important role in the region's effort to address climate change through community-based climate actions. So the purpose of the document is to develop knowledge management system to share experience, building capacity, and promote best practices for implementing community-based climate action in ASEAN, and also to promote participation of non-party stakeholders in building strong and mutually benefit partnership between government, business, civil society organization, and local communities. Later, the document will contain some elements, namely lesson learned, criteria of best practice, knowledge-based management, and also elaborate the potential collaboration. The position is the same. We know has the pre-draft 0 document, and we also have a plan to share with ASEAN member states this week, so to get their attention and also for discussion. Okay, I think this is the end of my presentation to share with you about the climate priority agenda during the Indonesia ASEAN Chairmanship. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Pak Wisnu, for the explanation. There are 3 sections that Pak Wisnu has explain to us, most importantly, the deliverables that the Ministry of Environment and Forestry are now working close together with the other ASEAN counterparts in this year's chairmanship, including also programs like REDD plus, also reducing deforestation, carbon financing, capacity development, and also very important is articulating common position of ASEAN member states at UNFCCC and other international forums. Pak Wisnu's presentation will conclude our first section of today's discussion. Thank you very much, Pak. And now we are moving towards the next session, that is panel discussion, and we would like to invite distinguished guests to distinguished speakers to respond to some of the deliverables that has been mentioned. And for the first opportunity, we would like to invite Ibu Esther Tamara, the Director for Climate Unit at the Foreign Policy Community Indonesia, FPCI. There will be also a scene-setting presentation entitled Decarbonizing ASEAN. What role can CSOs play to advance energy and climate agenda in the region? The time is yours, Ibu Esther.
Thanks very much, Pak Muhammad. And firstly, I also want to thank Pak Fabi Tumiwa and IESR for organizing this very timely panel discussion. I also appreciate Pak Wisnu Murthy and Pak Ridwan Budi for sharing what the Indonesian ASEAN Chairmanship is currently pursuing for its climate and energy agenda. In this opportunity, I'd like to share my perspectives on how civil societies in ASEAN actually perceive the issue of climate change and energy transition. And furthermore, how we can elevate these voices from the Southeast Asia region so that it can be heard by the ASEAN leaders and ASEAN as a regional body. As a bit of a context, I'm from Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, so we focus on foreign policy, but we've been active championing for climate issues in the past 2 years. So it's been terrific to be able to share this panel with all of you. Allow me to share my screen, and hopefully everything should be visible very soon. Wonderful. So I've been asked to address this topic specifically, and I'd like to start first by playing my foreign policy analysis training, which is, we need to understand what ASEAN is as an organization and what are its capabilities and its limited constraints. So ASEAN, unlike the EU, is a policy coordination regional body, whereby in the European Union member states are pulling several of their, a little bit of their sovereignties in decision making to European Union as the supranational organization. ASEAN does not have that, whereby for all member states, any decision making processes, any statements and declarations, it has to be consensus based. And this means that there's a principle of non-interference in AMS internal affairs. When I say AMS, I mean ASEAN member states. As such, the ASEAN as a regional organization has no authority to impose policies on ASEAN member states. And this is very important because what we're trying to look at here is whether ASEAN can enhance its internal capability to address 21st century challenges such as climate change and also energy transition. We'll come back to this a little bit later, but for now, I'd like to share also what the ASEAN member states, ASEAN countries have already pledged for the climate in its own national state. So ASEAN member states climate targets, out of the 10 member states, 9 has adopted net zero emissions targets, and 8 of those have declared net zero by 2050, aligned with the Paris Agreement to keep global temperature heating only to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Philippines, unfortunately, has not have any net zero target established yet. They have a 2030 deadline established, but no net zero official pledge. And Indonesia has pledged to reach net zero by 2060 or earlier. And of course, we appreciate Indonesia's national government ambition to reach net zero by 2060. But of course, we also want to be assure that our policies are aligned to keep our planet safe. And to reach a 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need to reach net zero by 2050. This is particularly very significant because according to a survey that's been done by Singapore-based think tank, ASEAN Yusof Institute, when respondents of this survey were asked which ASEAN country has the potential to be a regional climate leader, Indonesia sits at the second rank. This survey, by the way, encompasses of more than 1,300 responses across 10 ASEAN countries. And the first top choice ranking, this can be understood as typically for the past few years, Singapore has been the one more climate progressive. But the fact that Indonesia actually sits at the second is a little bit concerning in the sense that Indonesia, as a de facto leader of ASEAN, as one of the founding members of ASEAN, who's very well positioned and strategically positioned to play a leadership role in this issue, is not yet aligned with the Paris Agreement to have net zero by 2050. But what we're going to do next is actually try to understand, okay, so the national governments have these targets set in place, but what does the ASEAN people really think? And firstly, I think we need to understand that ASEAN, fortunately, has been a source of regional peace and stability for the past few decades. Since its founding in 60s and 70s, thanks to ASEAN, the Southeast Asia region has been relatively quiet or peaceful, except for the Cambodian conflict that we resolved back in the 70s, and now the Myanmar political crisis that we're trying to address. But other than that, ASEAN is probably one of the most peaceful region in the world, thanks to the existence of this regional organization. Now, when we talk about the existence of ASEAN now and then its relevancy to the future, we need to see what the civil societies actually want and what ASEAN can deliver for the peoples of ASEAN. And the survey from ICS Yusof Ishak actually states that the number one pressing issue that, according to the civil society, ASEAN must address is unemployment and economic recession. You can see here that almost 60% of the survey respondents picked that as the number one top pressing challenges. And the second one that follows not very far behind, only 1% to 2% difference, is climate change. Because for lack of a better word, climate change has been severely impacting the people of ASEAN for the past few years. The climate crisis for Southeast Asia is actually already here. And this is a very monumental shift of perspective. Previously in 2022, in the inner circle here, you can see that the number one concern was actually COVID-19 pandemic and threat to health. But within just 1 year, this all shifted. And most of the respondents now believe that ASEAN's number one and number two climate pressing challenge is actually economic recession and climate change. And these two issues are actually very much interlinked to one another because, as we know, climate change can actually pose a risk of ASEAN losing 35% of its GDP by 2050. So again, on the grassroots level, the people have already demanded and the people want ASEAN to address the climate change issue. Even if we break it down country per country, you will see here that climate change here in the red square consistently dominates or get the most majority of votes from the survey respondents, almost consistently in ASEAN 5 countries, such as Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, and Singapore. It's above 60%. The only notable exception is in Myanmar, where they think domestic political instability should be priority, understandably so, given the current political crisis that they are facing. Now, to what extent does the respondent think that climate change will negatively affect their life in the next 10 years? Again, the civil societies of Southeast Asia have already rated this, rated that their the negative effect on their life is between 7% on average. For Philippines, it's even higher. It's 8.4 on a scale of 1 to 10. Again, Myanmar is a notable exception given the aforementioned reason. And when we asked the region, when the survey asked the respondents who are responsible for addressing climate change, not responsible for the climate crisis, but who should be the one addressing the climate change issue, their number one top choice is national government. Almost 28% of the votes go there. Secondly, it goes to businesses and industries at about 23%. And then ASEAN, which is under the category of multilateral organizations, is at 17%. So ASEAN is considered to be number 3 group responsible for addressing climate change. Now, I find this very interesting because while perceptions of ASEAN civil societies rank ASEAN at number 3, we have to think about the potential and the opportunity that ASEAN as a regional body can actually leverage to address the climate change issue. I'm sure all of us here know how rich ASEAN is in its natural resources. Laos itself, as a self-declared battery of Asia, is among the regions richest for hydropower. Indonesia and Philippines is very rich on geothermal generation capacity. We're also, the region is actually also very much blessed with the wealth of clean energy products, raw materials. So there are many opportunities where ASEAN member states have its own specialization and contribution towards energy transition. Unfortunately, what's missing here is the regional coordination and official mechanism of regional coordination to ensure that each of these ASEAN member states together can collectively advance the energy agenda and the climate agenda to reach a Paris-aligned goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Imagine the opportunity that we could tap into has a mechanism, if the mechanism is in place. Now, where does the civil society fall into all of this, right? The previous speakers, our government officials, representatives have rightly said that ASEAN declared itself as a people-centered organization. And when you put people at the center, what one would expect is that the regional organization actually hears aspirations, openly consult and dialogue with the civil societies. But unfortunately, as of this moment, to the extent of my knowledge, there is no formal mechanism for civil societies to share their climate aspiration. One second. There seems to be an error in my computer. Okay. Yeah, as I was saying, there are no formal mechanisms for civil societies to channel their aspirations. Certainly, there are forums such as the ASEAN Civil Society Conference or ASEAN People's Forum. But again, to the extent of my knowledge, this is not an official mechanism that is initiated by ASEAN Secretariat to pull aspirations, ideas, or even feedback from the civil societies. Which leads to my second point, which is ASEAN, unfortunately, is a top-down organization and not bottom-up. So what I mean by top-down is when ASEAN governments set their agenda, they expect civil societies to support this agenda setting instead of openly consulting the civil societies, what should be the priority issue, what should be the priority agenda for this particular year of chairmanship and moving forward to the next years. Whereas I'm sure, as we all know, the civil society very much wants to be included in the decision-making process and the deliberations for agenda setting, which leads me to my last point, which is ASEAN decision-making process remains elitist. Elitist meaning that it's insulated only to government bodies, and for non-government bodies that are engaged or they are included in the deliberation process, they are not in touch with the rest of the grassroots civil societies in ASEAN. And this is something that we have to pay attention to because otherwise there is no space for civil society to officially lobby or to officially dialogue with the ASEAN Secretariat to ensure that their aspirations, which already exist on climate change and energy transition, is officially taken into account. And this is a very unfortunate situation because the truth of the matter is ASEAN grassroots perspectives on climate change is very much already in the right place. We can take a look here that most of ASEAN respondents, about 40%, believe that their country has a role in international climate action. So to give you a little bit of a preview, the green color means that they believe the country should play a role in decarbonizing to global climate action. And then the yellow one says that, yes, we need to contribute to climate action, but other major powers also have to contribute to it. We can just see upon first blush that the green shares of these voting in the survey responses dominate very much the results. And the same is actually true for their responses towards the question, ASEAN countries should stop building new coal power plants immediately. Do they agree? And most of them say they agree. On average, more than 60% say that they agree that ASEAN member states should stop building new coal power plants immediately. I'm reaching the end of my presentation here, but I'd like to touch a little bit about the processes of ASEAN's secretariat decision making. Previously, the government officials from Energy Ministry and also Environment Ministry has shared what's going on in the working groups, and everything looks amazing. But what we need to understand is that in order for ASEAN priority issue to be recognized to the leaders level, there is a process. First, we go through the senior official meeting, and then it's escalated further to the ministerial meeting, and then it goes to the leaders meeting. Currently, there are mechanisms to talk about climate change at these two levels, the SOM and the ministerial. And then eventually, upon leaders' agreement, then they issue the ASEAN joint statements on climate change. The latest one was issued for COP26 in 2021, and will be, as the previous speaker said, we'll be issuing it again for COP28. But a side note on ASEAN statements, ASEAN produces hundreds and hundreds of statements and declarations every year. We need to make sure that when ASEAN actually takes into priority the climate agenda and energy agenda, it won't be just another statement. ASEAN cannot treat the climate agenda and energy agenda as business as usual anymore, where a statement will suffice any demand for attention from the body, right? We need to make sure that ASEAN actually has a political commitment and willingness to commit to a Paris-aligned goal. And there are two initiatives that I shared here where, in my opinion, civil societies can play a role in advocating. First, ASEAN is currently in the process of drafting the ASEAN Community Vision post-2025. So this will basically mandate what the three pillars of ASEAN communities, from economy to political security to social community, will do for the next 5 years. Now, as we all know, for the next 5 years, it will be a critical time, knowing that our carbon budget will run out eventually by 2030, if not earlier. So ASEAN Community Vision post-2025 has to be very climate aware. It has to have a coordinated climate strategy. All of these initiatives that we've done on biodiversity, marine conservation, on plastic management, and whatsoever, it has to be coordinated as such so that the climate change goal is actually met, and we want a Paris-aligned 1.5-degree world. So the CSOs in ASEAN can collectively advocate for this. And then secondly, there's been a proposal for the last two summits on establishing an ASEAN Green Deal. Now, this is particularly endorsed by Prime Minister Hun Sen of Cambodia himself, but to this day, I know that it has not gained traction, or there's just not been any movement towards officially adopting this Green Deal. But this is something, or this could be the mechanism that we could look potentially into in coordinating ASEAN's climate strategy and energy transition strategy. It was inspired by European Union's Green Deal, but again, as I said, because ASEAN is not a supranational organization, it cannot impose legally binding policy towards its ASEAN member states. On the caveat, however, so long as the ASEAN member states leaders, whether the presidents or prime ministers, have the political willingness to agree to the ASEAN Green Deal, then it can definitely be adopted. So despite all of the constraints of ASEAN, truly ASEAN is what ASEAN member states make of it. So if all the leaders, all the 10 ASEAN member states is seriously considering or wants to seriously address the climate change issue, then ASEAN Green Deal can just be easily established. But again, as I said, at this moment in time, I don't see any particular optimism for that. I'm gonna be sharing my last slide here, which is the action items part to advance climate and energy agenda in ASEAN processes. Given the processes of decision-making in ASEAN, we need to make sure that the civil societies in each country can mobilize, push for political willingness and commitment from their own national government. While that's been going on, we need also to use the narrative and the angle that ASEAN as a regional organization has the power, has the capability and the potential to collectively address the climate challenge. So not only pushing for climate action to your own national government, but to ASEAN as a regional body. Secondly, it will be an opportune time for ASEAN Secretariat to create a bottom-up official mechanism for CSOs' participation in processes. And lastly, to touch a little bit on foreign policy leveraging, ASEAN is very much strategic in its regional positioning in Indo-Pacific. Right now, ASEAN mechanisms such as the East Asia Summit is the only regional forum that can bring about the 10 ASEAN member states and the major powers in the region. Even beyond that, it can put in the same room the US and Russia, Australia, India, China, Korea, Japan, and the 10 ASEAN member states. So if ASEAN really believes in its ASEAN centrality and ASEAN people-centeredness, it needs to leverage its regional positioning in the Indo-Pacific to work together with these other major countries to potentially bring further cooperation for the region that can advance energy agenda and also the climate agenda. I will stop here. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I look forward to listening to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you very much, Ibu Esther. Some important points there. Ibu Esther has mentioned about the principles in ASEAN that might hindrance the progress, which is the necessity to uphold consensus-based mechanism in ASEAN. Also, the nature of the regional organization, that is policy coordination forum for Southeast Asian countries. And some of the survey findings from the ASEAN Yusof Ishak Institute are very striking. 39% or more of the respondents believe that ASEAN is pretty much elitist. However, we learned that a lot of people in Southeast Asia also believe, and the number is increasing, those who believe that climate change are among the top issues, the most serious issues that we are facing now. 57.1% of the respondents are believing in that. So there is a challenge how to navigate or how to strategize in this context that ASEAN as a regional organization is pretty much top-down and then consensus-based. So how the civil society organization can take part in the participation. So now we would like to invite the representatives of civil society organizations throughout the region. In the first opportunity, I would like to ask Mr. Natarun Ngoson from the Energy Lab based in Cambodia. Hello, Mr. Natarun Ngoson. How do you do?
Hello, how are you, Mr. Muhammad Rum?
Thank you very much, Mr. Natarun Ngoson. We would like to ask about your opinion here with the characteristic of the ASEAN as a regional organization. What is your view on the existing deliverables and initiatives that ASEAN is now working on, the climate change issues, and does the institution support rising climate ambition in the region and also especially in your country?
Yes, thank you for your question, and thank you very much for inviting me to the webinar today. And good afternoon, distinguished panelists, speakers, and participants. So first of all, maybe allow me to clarify, Energy Lab per se is not a CSO, a civil society organization. We are more of a non-profit organization, and our mandate is actually to work with CSOs and NGOs, but equally important is to work with government, with private sector, and with development partners and embassies in Cambodia and the region when relevant. So that's an important point because the neutrality that we adopt working with each of those stakeholders enable us to sometimes build bridges that would not materialize among one or many of those stakeholders. Okay, so I wanted to make that distinction because I know that this is about CSO engagement. So we do engage with them, and our role actually is to bring sometimes technical knowledge, sometimes strategic knowledge, sometimes policy knowledge related to the clean energy space and the energy transition. And by the way, now that I have kind of presented Energy Lab, I also wanted to say that our mandate is to accelerate the growth of clean energy markets in Cambodia. Okay, so yeah, so I wanted to set that clear for everyone. And now back to your question. So clean energy, the energy transition, and the ASEAN and the role of CSOs. So maybe something that is that hasn't been mentioned yet, I was surprised actually that I haven't heard it during the webinar, is the JET, the Just Energy Transition agenda. And this is an agenda that is important because Indonesia is the host this year, and Indonesia has been one of the countries that have benefited from what we call the JET partnership or the JETP. And one of the elements as part of the preparation of JET in different countries is the question in terms of how much civil societies can really engage in that process and influence the different goals that are attached to JET. So I'm happy to kind of discuss that in more detail, but with other panelists as well, because I don't mean to take the whole time. And I wanted to mention a work that has been led by Oxfam in that space. So this is in the space of the just energy transition. And they have published a very important policy paper that is called Advancing JET, or Advancing the Just Energy Transition in the ASEAN. And why do we consider that? So we were part of the consultation and the discussion along with many others organizations. Those were mainly NGOs, INGOs, and CSOs from the region. And it was really thinking about what have been discussed during that webinar. So, you know, how to mitigate the adverse impact of climate change, and really thinking about how to decarbonize and accelerate decarbonization by 2030, right? And of course, thinking about decarbonization, one needs to also think about what are the market reforms and what are the policies that are enablers to kind of encourage open competition and fair competition for energy generation. And of course, when we talk about decarbonization, each context within the ASEAN region is very different. And the context of Cambodia will be very different, for example, from the context in Indonesia, right? So understanding that, understanding where each of the 4 players that I mentioned at the beginning stands, and how can we engage in a manner where everyone is informed and can really then contribute, be consulted, and really therefore move that agenda one step forward. And I wanted, before I continue, before I stop, I wanted also to mention that, yes, the human-centered energy transition is very important. Often when we talk about energy transition, those are very high-level discussions. And they're very complex also because the energy sector is complex. So our role is to make it less complex, is to make it clearer. And therefore, in Cambodian context, the CSO/NGO space has been, I would say, quite vocal in terms of everything that related to hydropower generation, especially on the mainstream Mekong. But then, with the increasing potential that has been realized, for example, related to solar PV in Cambodia, you are talking about 45 gigawatts, which is a lot. here the knowledge is lesser. So our role is really to kind of bring that knowledge accessible so that those NGOs that are working closely with local communities understand what are the benefits, what are the costs. We talk, and now we start to talk already about, for example, all the end-of-life products, all the recycling chains, all the potential elements related to land management, and how this is really important for them to think about all this, and how they should also engage in a very constructive dialogue with either local authorities or national government. And I will stop there, and I'm happy to kind of answer any question that may come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ngoson, Mr. Nataran Ngoson, for the insight on the situation there also in Cambodia. Perhaps we can keep our questions as well to Mr. Nataran Ngoson, and later on we can ask him again. We will move to Papa Anthony Tan, Mr. Anthony Tan, the Executive Officer of All Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia on Sustainable Goals. We would like to ask Malaysia as a society now improving a lot in its democracy, civil society as well, civil liberty, also political rights. Has it helped this new setting in Malaysia help CSOs to partake in the climate change discourse and also policy making? Excuse me, sir, I think you are still muted. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak. First of all, I'd like to thank EISR for giving us the opportunity to share our work. Again, as Mr. Natropon mentioned, I'd like to introduce my organization properly. The All Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia on Sustainable Development Goals is a very long name. Our acronym is also very long, APPGM SDG. We are actually a creature of parliament. We were created by the Parliament of Malaysia in 2019, October. I work with the Secretariat, which is actually run by the Society for Development of SDGs in Malaysia. So we are a civil society working with parliamentarians in localizing SDGs. I'd like to first touch upon this thing about people-centered ASEAN. This is something close to my heart because it was declared in Kuala Lumpur on 27 April 2015 during the 26th ASEAN Summit. And I was there during the ASEAN People's Forum. Unfortunately, the ASEAN People's Forum and the Government Forum are two separate issues. There is difficulty in actually communicating between one group to another. Secondly, this thing about people-centered ASEAN does not translate into freedom of movement within ASEAN. Today, we still are not coming to the stage as in the EU, where if I'm a member of ASEAN, I do not need to bring my passport to cross into Thailand or into Laos or Cambodia or even to Singapore for that matter. I still have to bring my passport. So this idea of ASEAN fraternity, I think, is something which we are still quite far behind. It should actually allow, for example, we have millions of Indonesian workers in Peninsular Malaysia, and maybe about, I don't know, half of them are undocumented. This should not be the case because we are all supposedly brothers and sisters in ASEAN. So that's the second thing. The third thing is there is no new fixed presentations from ASEAN when it comes to the United Nations. I've been to two different UNFCCC conferences. First one was in Bali. It was a very good visit because it's Bali. The second one was in Doha. But when I went to Doha, Malaysia was not sitting with Indonesia. Malaysia was sitting with Egypt, because they are part of the like-minded group. Singapore was sitting with the AOCs because they say they are a small island nation. So there were only reason that ASEAN got together was because of loss and damage. So it was money that brought people together. Yeah. In Malaysia now we have a focus on PV and hydro. There are no new coal-fired power stations that are coming on board, at least for the next 10 to 20 years. And we are also looking into SDG 12 by addressing it through circular economy. This is something which is becoming a buzzword in Malaysia. Circular economy, extended producers' responsibility. But in terms of coming back to energy, Malaysia, the Ministry of Energy has just lifted the ban of sale of renewable energy in terms of export. So now Malaysia can actually sell to Singapore and receive money in Singapore dollars, which is 3 ringgit to a dollar. Or now I think it's about 3 ringgit 40 cents to the dollar. So it is a very good source of income for the RE players. So I'll just stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Anthony. It's very interesting. Later on, we can ask Pak Anthony Tan for further details. Let us move to Aryan de Ocampo, the Officer of Advocacy, Networking and Communication of the Center for Energy, Ecology and Development based in the Philippines. Ms. de Ocampo, are you there?
Hi, is my audio okay?
Yeah, you are loud and clear. Thank you very much for joining us after listening to the representative of the Indonesian government that is now working on the Indonesian chairmanship in ASEAN. What's your expectation on this year's agendas, and would it support the climate ambition and also the campaign that many CSOs now are working, for example, for the net zero and also the emission reduction? What do you think? Or perhaps there are some room for improvements that the CSOs can help? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Aryan from the Center for Energy, Ecology and Development. Before I start and respond, I'd like to extend the apologies of our Executive Director, Cherry Arances, who really had wanted to be here, but unfortunately could not because of an unexpected schedule. Anyway, we're based in the Philippines. To introduce quickly, we are an advocacy and research organization advancing ecological justice, transformative energy, and people-centered development. In the last year and a half, we have also been actively tracking gas expansion in Southeast Asia, and we would soon be releasing another briefer on this, but essentially what has been dubbed as the region that is the coal's last bastion. It's now a region fueling a fossil future, now with about 158 gigawatts in the pipeline for gas. And this forum, thank you for organizing this, is very timely, and it's really important now with Indonesia holding the chairmanship, because the country, as we know, is a major fossil fuel player in the sector. And to cite some of the numbers that we know of, we know that at about 15 MTPA, Indonesia is the country building the biggest capacity of export terminals for gas in Southeast Asia, and over 10 gigawatts of new gas power as well. For the Philippines also, as many would know, Indonesia is actually the source of much of the coal that we burn, and we are a highly dependent country on coal. Indonesia's chairmanship of ASEAN, and frankly, all chairmanships held by countries in our region, are an opportunity to bring the plight of civil society and community-led climate and fossil fuel struggles to the fore. For the Philippines, this is very important because last year, for example, we have been identified by a climate risk index ranking as the most disaster-prone country in the world. We know this, but we know the terrible vulnerability to climate change as being also the context of our neighboring countries. Even then, even with our vulnerability, we spent the last decade expanding our use of coal, and now we're looking at another big fleet of new fossil gas in our pipeline. And this is despite our massive potential as well for renewable energy. For the Philippines and for Southeast Asian regions that are disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis and whose people are among the most who suffer from its impacts, there's a clear North Star, a clear guide that should be guiding our policy advocacies and engagements, which is keeping the 1.5 goal alive. Setting the highest possible ambitions to keep a more catastrophic climate future at bay should be our guide. And to that end, ASEAN and its member countries must be among the strongest voices in the world, demanding, for example, the urgent end to the proliferation of coal, gas, and all other fossil fuels. We should be the strongest among the strongest voices rejecting detours from an ecologically just and people-centered transition to renewable energy, and we should be demanding really the reparations and climate finance owed to us by historical polluters. We do know that civil society have made leaps and bounds to this end, but the imperative remains for us to continue pushing for our own governments to commit to ambitious climate actions, and for ASEAN to own up to its identity as an organization representing among the most vulnerable peoples in the world to climate change. Lastly, I'd like to note that we also should not forget to learn from the thriving civil society efforts across our region as to what civic movements have found to be valuable and working in advancing the energy transition in our own countries and in a region-wide level. That is all from me. Thank you very much again for organizing this forum.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ocampo, for the insight. I think it's very important for the civil society to collaborate across the region, as it has been showed by other sector. For example, in democratization, there has been very strong alliances of pro-democracy movement across the region. So why not for the energy transition and low carbon movement to have the same spirit as well? Here we have also Ms. Charya Senpong. How do you do? Ms. Charya Senpong is the Energy Transition Campaign Team Leader of Greenpeace Thailand. We would like to ask you when we have multi-alliance, for example, throughout the region, what's the current condition of a current development of climate justice campaign and also CSOs collaborations across the region, so that the civil society can influence, and also can support the velocity and also the targets of net zero emission. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, all speakers and participants. I'm Charya Senpong from Greenpeace Thailand at the Energy Transitions Campaign Team Leader. And thank you for your invitations. I thought it is important in terms of the civil society movement, because of we has been working in terms of to stop or derail the new coal projects for a long time, since more than 20 years in our regions, both in Thailand, in Indonesia, and in Philippines and others area. So at our country is like the destinies of the coal consumptions at the last expectations from export country. And right now, our regions, even some country has their own scenario to fade out coal in our regions, working closely and with our civil society and communities. But we are facing the new circumstance, like we not exactly cheap our energy consumptions, especially from electricity side, from fossil, from coal to renewable energy exactly. But it look like even in terms of our ASEAN as well, that plan is might shift from coal to fossil gas. So right now we are facing the same circle when our government has their plan to import more LNG in among the country in this region. So I thought it is a good movement as well at this period times when our government had the commit to the global agreement to reduce the greenhouse emissions, and it is good movement, and we should move together. With every sectors, private sector, civil society, or even our government as well. We need to strengthen the people power beyond the boundary, including litigation, financials, and political will. When the most of us it is under in terms of the politics area as well, calling for democracy in some country, and we also quite under the same similar in terms of the fossil monopoly. So it is important for us to move beyond the transboundary. And also, I thought it needs more clear as well in terms of the CSO engagement in these regions, how to move more in terms of we need to see the real net zero emission plan in our region. It is important how to propose the possibility scenario, to analysis the strategic environmental assessment, just recovery, economic, and also the scenario that if our region fade out coal and not go that if we can have a different scenario, it means we have alternative plan for our climate mitigations as well. So we would like to see that, in terms of the CSO movement. And also the second one, I thought is the importance about the financial movement on climate change and energy transition, how to support each country. Right now, we exactly know in terms of our country, in some country like Thailand, also as a key players in terms of the financial support on fossil in these regions and also fossil investment as well. Our Thai bank also on the top 10 of this region to support fossil investment, and also we are so under the risk of the climate emergency as well. We also under the top 10, while Indonesia also facing the same thing, I think. And also the Philippines, Myanmar, and Thailand, we are still on the top 10 of the risk of the climate change impact. So how we can move together in terms of CSO movement in this area, and how to block in terms of the fossil financial support in this region, or shift the the financial policy not go mainstream on just only fossil, but how to prioritize the investment to renewable energy in this region. It is important that we would like to see that. And the third one is about communication. I thought it is important to communicate not just only the citizen in our regions, but also the politician mindset as well. How to shape the mindsets of policymaker in each country, and not just each country, but also in terms of ASEAN framework as well, because of the how we get more quick policy changings. That means the implementations will become the quick as well as we expect. I just would like to add more in terms of I thought the important things is our CSO work should work closely with the different layers of engagement to propose a kind of policy and recommendations that narrative and frame the region's movement from civil society to ASEAN member. And we can see the different plan of that after we analysis the benefit, the pro and con of each plan. And also I thought the important things after that, not just only in terms of the policy framework and political lobby work, but also I thought that the important things that we still lacking in our regions is about green and just transboundary investment policy should be developed from our regions, because of we also invest across our country, or we invest in terms of the energies business to other neighbor country in our region. So how to make it as a policy or a plan under the green and just energy transboundary investment. The second thing is in terms of human rights and business investment framework. I thought many countries in terms of ASEAN's member also ratify is with the UN on human rights and business investment. So how to strengthen the right of community and citizens who are battling the climate movement. We also facing, a lot of cases in our country. For example, in Thailand, we're facing the thing that named SLAP case, that strategic lawsuit against the public participant. This many cases is under the administrative court right now, and it's really threatened to people who are fighting to the climate change. So it is important in terms of the ASEAN framework. And the last thing, I thought ASEAN should standardize in terms of a kind of air pollution and smokestack from the fossil fuel power plant in the regions. In the last week, EPA in the US had just proposed the new pollution limit proposed to the US coal and gas power plant. They would like to reflect more urgency of the climate crisis. But it is very important that we would like to see that movement in terms of new pollution limit across the country had the same standardized in our regions, and we can move together when we call it green and just energy transboundary investment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Ms. Charia Sempong, for your insight. I think by listening on your insight, we learned that there must be a lot of methods that we can utilize in order to socialize and educate not only the people, but also the politicians themselves. Because at the end of the day, policy coordinations in ASEAN will go through them. And it's very important for the civil society organizations, think tanks, research institutions to closely work together and also try to push forward the ideas, new solutions, more ideas that the government have. I think it's would be better for them so that they are not bounded in very limited rationality and also limited resources. So involving the people will have its own benefits. Thank you very much, Ms. Charia Sampong. And now we are moving to the last section of our discussion today. We are going to open up and invite the participants to ask questions to our distinguished speakers today. We are still have Pak Rudi as well, Pak Wisnu, also the other speakers. So here in the chat box, also Ibu Debbie Siamturu has started the discussions earlier. Also Ibu Gracia Paramita, thank you Ibu Esther and Pak Wisnu that has responded the questions. The audience can raise the hand and then we will give you the floor to ask questions. Okay. Any questions from the audience? Oh, here is from Ibu Esther. Ibu Esther, yes, please. Do you want to open mic? Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for all the panelists for sharing their perspectives on their national context. I was just very curious to hear from Ibu Sampong about, what are her thoughts about the recent political developments in Thailand? Does it tie anything to the climate agenda? So please share with us, Ibu. Thank you.
Yeah, current development in Thailand.
Thank you so much for your questions. Also, it's so excited in our country as well. I mean, like right now, when we just finished the elections, and Pitha become the main candidates of our prime minister. In terms of Greenpeace, during the last 2 months, we also raising the campaign under we call election campaign. We propose our main climate change policy or climate change recommendations and also energy transition to the main targets of our political parties, including in terms of Khao Klai party that Pitha victories. And we just seen the big disruptive moment in our country when it is the first time that the political parties accept our own policy about climate change and energy transition. So Pitha parties had just announced that if within the 3 months, I mean like a 100 day, around 3 months, right? Their parties will go to officially announce fade out coal in our country. That means by the end of 2030s in our countries, we'll go for fade out coal in scenario, and we can go the vision is quite quick than that. We can announce to fade out coal in our country by 2027. And this is the key point. The second point is they will announce the new measurements in our country that called net metering. Net metering is important because it can shift the consumer to prosumer. That means right now, the scenario in our country, people also discuss a lot in terms of the electricity bill has been increasing in every 3 months. So net metering will be the effective policy to allow people to install solar rooftops at the household sectors and sell electricity back directly to the national grid. So if we exactly know under our study, Thailand has the potentials to install solar rooftop solar energy in our country more than 30,000 megawatt, where the consumptions of are around 35,000 megawatt across the country. But if we can grow more in terms of solar investment under the net metering policy, that means we can further achieve on the real zero emissions in our country. Yeah, but we hope Pita will become our next prime minister. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the info on the current situation and the prospect of the new government and its correlation with the civil society movement, particularly in environmental sector. Itu Chaya Senpong. And now I would like to invite more questions, perhaps one or two more questions from the floor. Any participant? Okay, if not, then perhaps this is my last question for Mr. Anthony Tan, Mr. Natarun Wason, and also, excuse me. Oh, raised hand. Okay, I did not see the raised hand. Oh yeah, here the committee informed me that there is one raised hand. However, there is I cannot see it on my screen. I'm Mr. Ahmad Ikram Kurniawan. Yeah. Would you mind to open the mic?
Hello.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps I would like to question this to everyone, but at first, can we talk about electric vehicles? Because if we talk about low carbon and energy green and such, we can unrelate ourselves with the electrical vehicles. Can we talk about it?
Yeah, sure. Go on.
Yeah. About the electric vehicles, I'm a bit of concerns that the electrical vehicles might be not into low carbon and such, especially if we talk about the source, like the coal-powered power plant and our nickel mine, especially the nickel mine, which the Indonesia itself is the largest nickel deposit in the world, about 22 million cubic. So this might be really interesting to the car manufacturers to invest the battery in here. But what I'm concerned about is the mining activities, because, well, as you know, is the mine itself requires a lot of energies and a lot of trucks and car and such. And then what can we do about to reduce the source of electrical vehicles?
All right. Okay. Thank you, Mas Ahmad Ikram Kurniawan. Yeah. Okay. The question is about the dilemma or the impact of the electric vehicles ecosystem on the environment. So I would like to forward this question to our panelists, maybe Pak Ridwan or Pak Wisnu. Also, Mr. Natarun Wason and Mr. Anthony Tan, would you mind to give some insight on that?
I'm happy to start if others want me to. Happy to anyone also.
Yes, sure. Go on, Mr. Natarun.
All right. So thank you for the great question. This is a question that often comes when we talk about e-mobility and EV. So maybe there is two parts to this question. Maybe if there is one person that is not muted.
Sorry.
Okay, great. Sorry, thank you. It was so. The question, I think, the length of the person question is looking at a global value chain perspective, and it's therefore what we want to talk about is how to green the value chain, and this is a very relevant topic. But then it applies across the board. The manufacturing industry for the car industry right now is not carbon neutral from far, and therefore at the beginning of the chain, you're talking about mining. It's very important, right, to look at more sustainable mining practices. It's important also to keep in mind the availability of raw material and how much of that raw material will be needed in order to cater, or to replace the ICE engine for the whole global car markets. So that's really a bigger question, and it's a good one. But there is another important dimension to take into consideration, which is really within the boundary of each countries. And so if we look at it from this angle, Cambodia is a country where people are still using a lot of second-hand vehicle. Yes, so and second-hand vehicle are large emitters of CO2, whether those are, just two-wheelers or four-wheelers from, middle class or a lower middle class household. Replacing those vehicles with electric vehicle will have a tremendous impact in terms of stopping those CO2 emissions. And the transportation sector is today one of the large contributor in Cambodia, to GHG emission. So I don't know what happened to the screen, but it's okay. Electric mobility is still a solution that will contribute to decrease the level of GHG emission. If we look at it from a country perspective, it doesn't mean that we need to ignore the global value chain perspective, but therefore the kind of effort has to be done by global brands at headquarter level, and those are other type of mechanism that would come and maybe support the implementation of new solutions.
Park, can I just add in?
Yes, please.
I think when we talk about climate change, we also have to talk about changes in the way when we do things. And in Malaysia today already, you have a situation where there are more cars than people registered. And we have to move that paradigm from using your own personal car to e-mobility and using more public transport. If everyone in the world becomes an American in thinking and buys a SUV, even if the SUV is electric SUV, there will not be enough bauxite in the world to build half of the cars that they want. The batteries will not exist unless you can actually have a nuclear power station running in your car. So if we want to make a dent in transportation, we have to look at how we transport ourselves. If we continue to use personal cars, it's not going to work. Even if we were to shift everything to electric vehicles, the dent, if I'm not mistaken, reports are that the dent on CO2 emissions is only going to be 4%. Because we still have to generate electricity either by PV or by what they call wind, or by other renewable sources like hydropower. It will still consume a lot of cement to build hydropower stations. It will take up a lot of energy to put up what they call wind harvesting farms. So that percentage is not going to drop unless we change the way we do things, the change we do our lifestyle. But just to come back a little bit on CSO action in Southeast Asia, we have this thing called CANSI, and Fabi is very familiar with CANSI, Climate Action Network Southeast Asia. We have Malaysian Climate Change Group in Malaysia, MCCG. Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand all have our own national groupings. And of course, we're affiliated to CAN International. Malaysia has already been doing net metering for the last 3 to 4 years. Before that, we were doing FIT, feed-in tariff. So we have been going into that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Anthony Tan. The importance of public transportation should be prioritized in order to reduce the emission, and in that case, meaning that the policy coordination should have been channeled towards strengthen the initiatives on public transportation more than individual transportation. Okay, we would like to inform you that unfortunately the time is limiting us. Hardly to notice that we have spent 2 hours in this very lively discussion. And now we arrive at the end of the discussion. And before I pass back to Siha and Pak Arif Rosadi, I would like to thank all of the distinguished speakers for today. Thank you very much for the insight, and also all of the participants in the chat box. The discussion is also very lively. Last thing, thank you from me, and I'll pass back to Siha. Thank you very much.
For moderating the speakers and panelist sessions. I hope the audience enjoy the fruitful and insightful discussion for today, and we hope that you can gain more insights about the pressing issues in the ASEAN Chairmanship of Indonesia. And now, to conclude our event, I would like to invite my colleague Arif Rosadi, the Climate Diplomacy Coordinator at IESR, to deliver his concluding remarks to this event. So, Arif, you may have the stage.
Okay, thank you, Siha. On behalf of the IESR, I would like to convey my appreciation and thank you to all speakers, panelists, participants, and moderator. Bapak Budi, Pak Wisnu, Pak Rum, Aryan, Esther, Natrun, Anthony, and Ceria. Thank you so much for sharing your view and valuable insight with us. As Pak Fabi mentioned in the opening remark, we have great expectation that after this event, ASEAN CSO that focus on energy transition, particularly can initiate concrete collaboration in the near future, and together we can contribute to accelerating the energy transition in the region and tackling climate change. And I'm grateful that today I see the spirit of collaboration among us, and it's a good start. And without further ado, I would like to highlight and amplify the importance of our discussion today. First, we appreciate and welcome Indonesia ASEAN Chairmanship this year that address the energy transition and climate agenda in the region. And we hope that Indonesia Chairmanship this year in ASEAN can strengthen climate ambition and energy transition progress in the region through concrete deliverable and outcome. And second, there is something to note as highlighted by Mbak Esther, that ASEAN society is concerned with climate change, and they hope that ASEAN can take a charge to address issue in a more robust way. And we hope this dialogue can be initial step in strengthening and establishing ASEAN CSO networking on energy transition and climate agenda, and continue to advocate shaping our planet. And however, our work is not done. In the next step, we need further collaboration, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the further concrete collaboration. Thank you. Back to you, Sia.
Okay, so now that that marks the closing of our events today. And as Arif has said, this is definitely not going to be the last step in our collaborations. So I would like to close this event today. And once again, thank you for all your participants and the speakers and the panelists. And we will see you again in the next collaboration in the future. Thank you and goodbye.